Welcome to another episode of The Axis, where we discuss everything Axiom and everything automotive. So I'm here with Mike Reth, and we're going to talk reinsurance. There's a lot of confusion that revolves around reinsurance, and Mike's going to shed some light onto why that might be. Mike, so tell us a little bit about your opinion on reinsurance, and why do you think there's some confusion in the marketplace?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of shift, a lot of change in the last few years. There's been updates to regulation in 2018. The most common reinsurance structure for auto dealers and warranty-based products made a significant change. And with that, there's been a lot of misinformation as to what that really means and how that impacts producers in a positive light, but I don't think very much has been presented to them potentially in a negative light, not for the purposes of reinsurance being a good strategy or not, but truly, are you still in compliance from your old legacy strategy? The other thing that we're seeing in the industry, and it's just a kind of a period in most businesses this time, in this stage of life, is that we've got a lot of reinsurance executives in our space that are entering and leaving the industry because of retirement. And, they've worked very hard for many, many years, paid their dues, but that's creating a vacuum in our space of people that truly understand it at a high level. And, we're looking at ways to figure out how to educate that next generation with positive, accurate, prolific means to convey reinsurance or underwriting profit, risk transfer methods that would be applicable to a dealership or dealership environments.
I mean, do you still think that do you think some of it might be there's a negative stigma around reinsurance, or is that the fact that people just don't really understand it and they go straight into the offshoring portion of it, or, the tax sheltering, if you will?
Listen, we've got a lot of people using buzzwords. Buzzwords are the kryptonite of the conversation, and we have people that use assumptions incorrectly. They use fear and tactics to get people confused. And quite honestly, these are very tested and tried and true legitimate business processes. They're very much in compliance with IRS taxation. There are modifications to these processes and protocols that have now given dealerships and large, dealer groups or even agencies with large risk pools the options to diversify and create better wealth building skills. And understanding that is not easy because you really had to have a strong foundation in what the original process was. So one of the things we've contemplated as kind of an organization and even socialize it with other organizations is, what if we were to make a better effort educating our reinsurance sales associates, people that are interacting with dealers, rather than use words like offshore, using taxation, methods and methodologies. A lot of our sales professionals don't have accounting degrees. They don't have CPA experience. They weren't controllers or CFOs of dealerships. And then the whole stigma of being offshore. The reality is, in our world, just because you're offshore doesn't mean that you're avoiding tax or you've done anything nefarious. In fact, we're one of those businesses where the first thing we do in reinsurance is we declare being an offshore U.S. taxpayer the moment we repatriate the money. But the perception and stigma is that it's offshore. Now, granted, I think there are some advantages to having a domicile and structures onshore, and we promote those as well. But there is no one-size-fits-all structure for reinsurance that should be promoted by any one organization. It's like an analogy I like to use when someone's selling you life insurance. You may go to your wealth manager and say, I'd like to retire at age 65. I'd like to be able to travel to see my grandkids, and I'd like to be able to, go on one extra vacation a year. Well, that life insurance agent's going to say, I have an annuity and a whole life policy for you, Mr. Smith. Then you get the next person that says, I'd like to retire at 59. I'd like to travel 7 months out of the year. And I'd like to also potentially, open a flower shop. And that same life insurance or wealth manager, life insurance agent or wealth manager is going to say, fantastic, I've got an annuity and a whole life policy for you. So they're selling the same process to the different needs and wants of that consumer. And ultimately, it's not the right strategy. I think that what we need to be able to do is educate our sales reps and agents with the ability to speak at a 50,000 foot level, to introduce concepts. If they have a skill set, to come down to the 30,000 foot level of explanation, but then at that commitment level of, hey, I'd like to move forward, they bring this school of experts, and this industry has a wealth of them, bring them to the table to only add more value to that conversation they're having with their dealers and agents. They'll get more out of it. But the most important thing is now you've got expertise, you have tax advice from CPA firms and accounting firms. You have legal advice potentially from those law firms that might be available, as well as these reinsurance consultants that really focus in on the right product diversification, the right setup strategy. And when I see organizations or a sales process include that type of approach, you get the most profitable reinsurance structure set up, the best tax strategy, and the most compliant venue to do so.
Great. So, I mean, it's kind of like what we run into automotive a lot, where we latch onto a buzzword, like you say, people are talking about offshoring or reinsurance, and that's the topic, and that's the dinner conversation. It never goes any further than that. But actually, it's much more complex than that. And you mentioned some different structures. I mean, I'm familiar with a couple of them. It's, I guess, CFC, NCFC, and then the buzzword of the year is DOWC. Of those structures, I mean, how complex are those, and what is the right one for a dealer? Or does it matter the size of the dealer, number of units sold? What is your recommendation? And when you look at it, where do you start talking to a dealer, and where do you usually end up?
One of the things I learned a long time ago when we were evaluating the best way to say what's the best structure strategy for any individual dealership, dealer group, agency relationship is you start from a needs analysis and work backwards. So often we start with, here's our product and process, and then we backfill to justify the sales transaction. And in those instances, every one of those structures has opportunity and benefit, and there's advantages for each one of them, but they don't apply across every single scenario every single time. Now, you will have companies promote one version exclusively because it's in their best product interest to do that. The other thing is we have so many organizations promoting a product first that allows someone to be in reinsurance as a strategy. And quite honestly, you should reverse those two things. You want to start with the wealth building, the estate planning. You want to make sure you have the right management team. You want to make sure you educate that dealer. This is what happens in the event of a sale of your dealership business entity, and how is that related to the exit. There's discounting involved on certain structures that many dealers don't take into consideration. So rather than start saying, hey, here's my service contract, you can reinsure it, and this is the method to do it, you want to start upstream with the conversation. The other thing that happens is when you start to promote a strategy without doing the needs analysis, it's very one-sided in its perception by the dealer. He's reading your body language. He's asking himself, am I being promoted the best solution, or am I being promoted the best solution for that person's pay plan? And when you can get away from that strategy and take more of a wealth management approach, now you're bringing all the trusted advisory roles to the table that they're looking for in reinsurance. Because quite honestly, most dealers, if they haven't been in reinsurance for very long or are newer to it, we're getting second and third generation dealers coming on board. They're only utilizing stuff they've heard in the ether about upside, benefit, taxation, all of those types of things. Sure. I'm overwhelmed by how often I hear somebody give a perception of what reinsurance is to them, and I only assume it was taught to them that way. And it might be vastly incorrect or off base, but the reality is that if they are open to this wealth management, understanding the approach to it, I think you can build the best strategy with the best product set, and it can be deployed so that it's measurable and tangible to show the dealer how he starts, where he is 6 months out, 12 months out, and then if you've deployed the right strategy within 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, you're actually demonstrating the wealth strategy that you started on day one.
Now, you said that I've always thought that reinsurance was specifically just for product, but now it sounds like you're saying there's much more that goes into reinsurance. Like there's other risk factors, or could be garage liability. Any of these things can go into reinsurance other than product. So the way you approach it is you take a holistic view. You just don't say how many VSCs do you sell. And that's that should be a red flag, right? If somebody walks to you and talks about reinsurance and only asking you how many gap insurance or how many tire and wheels do you sell, that should be a red flag that maybe you're not dealing with an expert. I mean, is it safe to say that?
I wouldn't say not an expert, but I think again, is there goal congruency in the conversation? The goal congruency needs to be, Mr. Dealer, I'm a dealer services consultant. I'm here to help you with F&I sales transactions, compliance. I want to train your team. I want to make them better as an outsource to you. In parallel to that, I want to take reinsurance as a means to create a fourth stream of wealth and revenue to you, right? Revenue constriction is something everybody in the automotive sector is looking at. So you start that conversation saying, what if I could help bring a fourth line of revenue to you? Now, people default to service contract because it is very traditional. It's very predictable. It's very profitable for most people in reinsurance. But then there are dealers that have a wide variety of products being seeded into their reinsurance structure that are profitable across every product, even the products people fear, like gap or tire and wheel. You can modify those products to make sure that they are the right risk set going into your portfolio or your position. In a lot of other cases, you're seeing people promote, again, a product theory first. So if I'm a service contract provider only or a service contract dealer service agent only, my proposition to you is you should be in reinsurance on service contracts, as opposed to here is your goal. This is what you're trying to achieve from a financial impact with your reinsurance structure. And maybe that financial impact is I would like to fund my personal contribution to buy more franchises, or I would like to fund real estate purchase in the future. If you knew what the ultimate goal was of that dealer, you can strategize better. As an example, most people skip over preloaded products, whether it's warranties or why buy here type products. Mm-hmm. Great products to go into reinsurance.
The market differentiators you're talking about.
Completely market differentiators. That's a strategy that most unsavvy reinsurance sales professionals don't promote, right? The other thing is that when you get to an enterprise level, a dealer group, a group that has 5, 6, 7 stores, great amount of F&I product potential, but now they're looking at deductible risk. And deductibles have skyrocketed in the United States for automobiles, whether it's open lot, whether it's carrier insurance, floor plan protection, you name it. So that's balance sheet risk that is unprecedented. So that's a financial opportunity to create an enterprise risk solution where those types of products can be created and put into a reinsurance structure. In fact, outside of the dealer world, captive reinsurance takes a broad look at everything insurance-based and says, how do we maximize the opportunity to participate in that insurance conversation across many, many insurance verticals? I have a colleague that's in captive reinsurance that's helping one of the largest university systems in the United States. Started out with a couple $100 million in reinsurance, and when they went in and looked at the entire portfolio of potential participation within 3 years, they took that captive reinsurance company on an enterprise level to $1.7 billion in premium. And it's completely structured appropriately, compliantly, at the right price points. It has different layers of protection and participation and risk. And I say that as an example to say we as reinsurance professionals have the ability to share that type of wealth management, but if we're only talking about a microcosm, a service contract participation program, you're not doing your dealer a full service in what you could do to help maximize his wealth potential.
Yeah. You mentioned that word captive. I've sat through one of your presentations before, and I'm intrigued by this captive formation. If I'm a dealer, if I'm not going to adopt it, why are more dealers not adopting captive formation? Or is there limitations on size? Is there a cost prohibitive factor involved? Tell us why you don't see more captives being formed in automotive.
There's different entry levels of capital contribution. I think that's probably one hindrance. Lack of promotion and understanding by the people presenting that to the ultimate, decision maker. It's captive formations, both domestic and offshore formations, are a very viable business solution. It's regulated. There's many different protections out there. But it's shifting the thought in the dealership. Just like the dealers are being forced today to think differently. You're not in the dealership business. You're in transportation. You're in the mobility business, right? And those are the things that I think you're doing with bringing reinsurance and other products and creating a captive. You're saying you should be in a parallel business that suits your automotive needs and wants.
Now, I know you get this question a lot from colleagues, and as I do too. The guys that we've grown up in the business with, these are guys that are not going out there and trying to buy stores, right? So they're seeking capital, they're seeking funding. Does reinsurance play into that? I mean, is there a way that they can tap that? I know that you said that the established dealer could use that to buy more franchises, but what if I'm just starting out? Should I be even focused on reinsurance if I'm buying my first or my second store?
This goes back to there's no universal answer to should you. It should be based on does the dealership sales volumes justify the process? I think in any entrepreneurial growth structure, you should have the ability to participate in some underwriting. And there's various forms along the path, whether it's a retro profit share to start, a CFC structure that only does service contracts, or then we get into dealer-owned warranty companies, and then ultimately an enterprise level. Depends on where you are going or where you are. As it relates to needing capital, reinsurance structures give you access in time when surplus emerges. And even in some of the investment strategies, it gives you access to it a little earlier in some structures. The reality, however, is dealers that are in the business that have made proceeds and profits in their reinsurance positions are looking for ways to invest. They have this capital in some of these trust funds or their B accounts that are saying, look, it's unencumbered. I want to invest. It would be a great medium to take some of that earned premium or earned surplus and create a lending platform to new dealers. They already know the risk. There's upside to, let's say, an established dealer investing or lending money against the purchase for a new up-and-coming GM who's buying his first or second store. He knows that if he follows this pattern of F&I and the repayment process of that money, the dealer who's lending has a pretty clear line of recovery and return on investment for that loan.
Sure.
So, I would say that for the new dealer, his decision of whether or not to start day one in reinsurance is going to be based on the store itself and what the volume is.
Yeah, I get that question all the time. I wish I knew the answer. That's why we rely on experts like you. Okay, so before we wrap up, we like to give people some takeaways. Give us 3 to 5 things to be looking out for or asking if you're working with somebody about reinsurance, or if you're considering forming a reinsurance account. What should you be looking out for, and what questions should you be asking?
If I'm a dealer or a dealer group ownership, the first thing I want to do is I need to evaluate, is my existing legacy strategy and structure compliant from where it was 3 years ago? I looked at a structure not too long ago that had been very established, very profitable, but promoted by a very prominent F&I provider in the space. But just by the sheer change in the 831B laws in 2018, they are no longer in compliance and were completely unaware. They had changed nothing. Products that were flowing in were the same. The profitability was measurable and it was the same. However, the control group test was not being met anymore under the new regulation. So I would absolutely do an independent or at least do a reinsurance evaluation. Where am I? The other thing that I think you need to look at from a dealer perspective is don't be closed-minded to think that there's only 1 or 2 products because you've been either conditioned or counseled by, let's say, a legacy product provider relationship. The reality is this. Every one of the products that are promoted in F&I, and there's over 20 at any given time, have the ability potentially to be in reinsurance. That's a fact. If the reserve is adequate, if the risk is low, there is an appetite for every product out there. So don't be confused in the aspect that there's only certain types of products that can go in there. If I'm on the dealer sales side and I'm promoting reinsurance to a dealer, I think one of the things I would suggest is go in as a vendor consultant. Mr. Dealer, there's two things that you're under pressure with today: revenue contraction and profitability contraction. If you had access to other revenue streams and the ability to increase profitability in parallel to what you do now, would you want to learn about it? I don't know a dealer that's going to say no to that proposition, right? And then you go into them and say, my approach is different. What I'm going to do is help you understand, have I maximized my potential with the products that I currently have being seeded? And that answer very well may be yes, Mr. Dealer, so there's no harm to you. But there may be other solutions that I can help you with, because it's going to give you an opportunity to see your full potential. Or if you're a dealer that's been on the outside looking in at reinsurance, let's make sure you have a firm, true, current understanding of reinsurance. And even if all I do is educate you today and you bring that solution to your current provider, you're going to be well armed to make decisions that are based on your needs, not the product provider needs, which happens, I think, so often.
Got it. So we got seek advice, right, from an advocate, somebody who's going to look at your business from a holistic approach, from a macro perspective on what you need. Make sure that you explore all your options with that advisor or expert, whoever you choose to go with, and then make sure that whatever you do select is compliant. Sounds like compliance is a big thing that's hitting industry.
There's a lot of resources out there. Some great resources have been around a long time. And if you're not affiliated as a dealer sales, dealer service person with those organizations, you need to be. That's first and foremost. Second, I believe that we as an industry should work on a certification process for our dealer services and dealer sales professionals, so that they can be more of an advocate with the proper reinsurance terminology, not put themselves in a trick bag related to giving advice outside their scope, and putting themselves in harm's way. I think there is a lot of upside to risk participation for dealers as a wealth building tool, as well as a fourth revenue stream that I think so many people are looking for. So if you are newer to reinsurance engagement as part of your sales practice as a dealer services agent, become an expert. There are plenty of resources. There are companies out there. There are great product provider companies that are willing to educate you. Don't just use 5 or 6 buzzwords to get you in the door, because those are the people that get replaced in year 1, 2, and 3 when those strategies and those buzzwords don't pan out.
Gotcha. Well, there you have it. Reinsurance Unbiased, Unscripted. Mike Reth, thank you very much. Thanks for listening. As always, you can find this podcast and all of our others on our website, axiomadmin.com. Just look for the access.